Hello, everyone. Today is March 19, 2022. I'm gathered here with Michael, and we have another session for you today. What does the Bible tell us about conspiracies? Michael, welcome.
Welcome, Brett, and hello, dear listeners. It's once again me to try to improve my English. And now we are heading on to session 19 in the case of conspiracies in general and JFK in particular. Many conspiracy theorists use the Kennedy assassination theories as evidence for other supposed conspiracies, and that is absolutely spot on. But the case of conspiracies goes back to the Bible, and so this argument is also not valid. But of course, the Kennedy assassination was a conspiracy because there was more than one man involved. So therefore, I don't care what other people are thinking. I'm just here for the truth, to speak out for the truth. And the Bible says about conspiracies that they happen. So therefore, this is not about his father, his brother, his presidency, or whatsoever. This is a session about his mother. His mother is called Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy. And I found at least a German book of her, which is called Alles hat seine Stunde, which means that to everyone's is an hour. And this is, I think it's a reference to Ecclesiastes. So that could be, by the title of that book, could be a quote from the Bible, Brett.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Would you like it if I read it?
No, not now, because you have waited too long. So I will proceed. No, you will face the fact that you will read it. You shall read it, but in the next session, because I've got now two sessions which are connected a bit of each other. So, what is about Mrs. Kennedy? Miss Kennedy seems to be a very harsh character, to be a very rigid character, because I found some interview how Rose Kennedy reacted to the assassination. And a researcher here points out that Rose Kennedy was just sorting things after she learned about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And she just putting things in order. And she said the rosary bread. Aha, so a very devout Roman Catholic who is not mourning or crying or what else, but it has been said, don't know if that is the truth, has been said that she was saying the rosary. And it has been stated that she wanted her sons to be well trained and to be perfect and to serve their country. So that was their main concern, that their sons must be perfect. That sounds like a career woman or somebody who was trying to put their boys on the path onto becoming a public household name. So that would also be the confirmation of his father's side that he had to run for president. So that, and in the first glance, it does not seem that there is any much difference between father and mother when it comes to John F. Kennedy. But it goes on and on and on. When Lyndon B. Johnson called her on the telephone from the Air Force One, he called the home of Kennedy, and he was handing over the message to Mrs. Kennedy that her son has been fatally wounded. And she was replying to him, "Yes, Mr. President." So she was not replying, "Yeah, Lyndon," or "Yeah, Mr. Johnson," but she was very formal and very official, and she said according to this, she said, "Yes, Mr. President." Yeah. So, Mrs. Rose Kennedy, the poised wife of the diplomat, she was coming from the diplomatic family. Her own father was a mayor, and her husband, Joe Kennedy, was a diplomat or an ambassador. So she was coming from a political household. A quote I found from Charles L. Drago called, "Anyone sincerely interested in this case who does not conclude that JFK was murdered as the result of conspiracy is either unfamiliar with the evidence or cognitively impaired." And what does that have to do with his mother? Well, you see that usually I think that children has been influenced by the education of father and mother, and most likely, as Mr. Kennedy father was a politician and a diplomat. He was much more influenced by his mother's side, because usually we have to estimate that he had spent more time with his mother than with his father. But let's hear it in her own words. She said in that interview in 1974, by the way, she was born in 1819, and she died in 1995, so she became 104 years old. And she saw, many, many children be killed or accidentally dying before she passed away. In that interview, she says on 13-minute mark, quote, "I was brought up a strict Catholic, and I think that helped." She says about strict discipline, she tells about Hail Mary, and she tells about being the mother of the president would be her most remarkable moment. As I heard that, I said that, wow, that's a very remarkable quote, because usually if I ask a mother, please tell me what was your most remarkable moment, your most favorite moment, usually they claim, oh yeah, it was of course the birth of my child. But she says, no, it was just the thing that being the mother of the president was the most remarkable moment in her life. That tells a lot, I think, right? Mm-hmm. So she was born in Boston, Massachusetts. She was the daughter of a mayor, and she was a devout Catholic, and she was being influenced by 3 separate exercises: the Rosary, the meditation of Cardinal Newman. Oh, Cardinal Newman is a convert of the Roman Catholic Church. I'm sorry for being that German script, but I have so much things on my hands at the moment that I could not translate it back. But you see that if you follow me, that I think that is not a hard thing to do, because he was a convert from coming from the Church of England to the Roman Catholic Church. This John Henry Cardinal Newman, I think it is a household figure for people who are following our channel spread, that he was one of the few people who were getting back into the arms of the Roman Catholic Church.
Right, another so-called Protestant.
Yeah, so-called. Yeah. Yeah, and the third exercise is the way of the cross. Yeah, so that you can smell, think, look everywhere you would like to, but you only will find the presence of Roman Catholic here. So her oldest son, Joseph Patrick, has died during a secret message or secret service mission in the Second World War. Her second oldest son, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, has been killed in Dallas, assassinated as being the President of the United States in 1963. Her daughter, Rosemary Kennedy, had a lobotomy, and she was mentally ill all her life. Then you got Kathleen Agnes Kennedy, who was killed during a plane crash. And then you got the brother of John F. Kennedy, Robert Francis Kennedy. He was murdered on the 6th of June, 1968 in Los Angeles when he was about to run for president. So you can imagine what kind of difficult life that woman had. She is depicted as a very devout Catholic, and she has been named, and now we switch back to finally you will say, you switch back to the English Wikipedia entry. Look at this. In 1950, the Pope granted her the title Countess of the Holy Roman Church. In 1950, when John F. Kennedy was very much alive. So that was a title for her given by the Pope, papal nobility. So to assume that she was a devout Roman Catholic is an underestimation. You see that she was a very devout Roman Catholic, otherwise she would not have bared the title here. Papal Countess. Huh? Why? How many women do you know, dear listeners, who are papal countess? So this is a picture here with President's son, John F. Kennedy. And many people claim that, oh, Kennedy belongs to the Illuminati. You see that Illuminati is a term which is most of the times allegedly and falsely been named for 13 families, and you see that has nothing to do with 13 bloodlines or so. I don't go follow that path, and I follow the path of the truth. And the truth is that the family of Kennedy, as we all know, were coming down from Ireland to Massachusetts, and especially the father of John F. Kennedy did everything to get rich, and so he served mammon, actually. And some people claim that the Fitzpatricks were a powerful Irish family whose coat of arms had the 3 fleur-de-lis with a dragon and a lion. That might be. And also that his wife, Jackie Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, who married John F. Kennedy, was tied to the oar, chin, clauses, various sister majesties, etc. That might well be, but that won't explain why things are happening or happened that way. The origin, this source claims, of the Kennedys in Ireland are very clear. They are descendants of Brian Vaughan, known as Brian Kennedy, and nephew who spelled it Cenedy. Yeah, therefore it was named O'Kennedy. That might be true. That might be true. But what I can actually confirm, or what is absolutely clear, that all these people had no ordinary life. They had to make it in this world, so therefore they had to bow down their heads to the mammon, actually, or to the god of this world. It doesn't make no sense to see John F. Kennedy or any other guy as a saint, or, you know, but, well, you see that these are very, very, very prominent people. Yeah? Also, Arnold Schwarzenegger married Maria Shriver, herself have very close ties with the Kennedy family. Yeah, so that's just money goes to money, huh? No, not going into Robert Anton Wilson. He's a disinformant agent. Yeah, so that was just that. That is not of interest for me. Let's look it up. Yeah, JFK's New Frontier speech, a strong and free, an example to the word. Yeah, you see that when they depict a Roman so-called goddess at the entrance of New York as a statue of liberty, you know that liberty has been bound to the Roman Catholics, or to Rome itself. Yeah, so that is, it's not very the liberty that you and me would like to have. I'm not quoting.
Yeah, that's liberty in Christ, Michael. Yep, I think it says in Scripture that that we should stand, therefore, in the liberty where Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Speaking of Egypt. Yeah, and I think today we are definitely entangled with Egypt pretty deep. Far beyond most of our comprehension, Michael.
I found that John F. Kennedy wanted to establish a kind of American Catholicism, and that is very much opposite to the Roman Catholicism. That's the big thing, I think, that if you followed his speeches, especially for the 1960 speech he gave, you see that he wanted to establish the Catholicism his way. Yeah, it's my way or the highway. And I found a book called John F. Kennedy and American Catholicism by Lawrence H. Fuchs. And I found that quote: "An opportunity came on the television program Face the Nation on Reformation Sunday when he restated his belief in a neutral, secular state in which all religions were permitted but none favored. He repeated that the Constitution and his conscience happened to be in close harmony and said, quote, 'I want people free to practice all their various religions. We are quite unique in this regard. I mean, many of the countries in Europe have a close union between church and state. We don't. All of us happen to believe that we don't want an official state church. If 99% of the population were Catholics, I would still be opposed to it. I do not want civil power combined with religious power. Now that's my view. I want to make it clear that I am committed as a matter of personal deep conviction to this separation. Now, what is there left to say?' Unquote. You see that from the eyes of the Vatican, who combine church and state, this quote is dynamite. And that would very much fit the views in a nutshell of John F. Kennedy. So he wanted a strict separation between church and state. Reformation Sunday, October the 13th, 1966, so before the election, came 8 days before the election. Hopes for a nationwide campaign against Catholicism were smothered by effective opposition within the Protestant churches. For the first time in many years, no mass Reformation Day rallies were held in St. Louis, Missouri, and ministers in other cities attacked Protestants' bigotry rather than the 13th century Catholic Church. The Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, the American Jewish Congress, the National Conference of Christians and Jews, the General Board of the National Council of the Churches of Christ in the United States of America, the Fair Campaign Practice Committee, and the General Fairness of President Eisenhower Republican candidate Nixon had succeeded along with Kennedy's forthright utterances in promoting a general climate of fair play. Yeah, that's also to say that this B'nai B'rith and this Anti-Defamation League, this is just a Freemason influence in them. In the climate of fairness, Kennedy narrowly defeated Richard Nixon for the presidency of the United States. Did he win in spite of or because of his religion? There is no doubt that Kennedy's religion helped reinforce the democratic proclivities of most Catholics, about 80% of whom choose Kennedy. How many would have voted for Nixon against Stevenson, Humphrey, Johnson, or Symington is impossible to say. Surveys revealed that more than 3 out of 5 Catholics who voted for Eisenhower in 1956 switched to Kennedy, but it cannot be determined how many would have voted Republican if Kennedy had been a Protestant. The Catholic vote for Kennedy was 3 to 6 percentage points higher than for Truman in 1948, but it is almost as misleading to compare Democratic votes between 1948 and 1960 as if they were constant in a qualitative sense as it would be to compare dollars. The 1948 GOP candidate was the singularly unattractive Thomas E. Dewey, and while Nixon could not have had the appeal of an Eisenhower for Catholic voters, even against Adlai Stevenson, he did represent a post-McCarthy militant anti-communism which had been proved attractive to Catholics. Also, by 1960, large numbers of Catholics have moved to the suburbs away from their lower class and lower middle class origins and presumably were more vulnerable to Republican appeals on domestic issues. Yeah, you see that it is very interesting because I think, or we think, that the religion issue by Kennedy is very much going under the radar if you will see a documentation on John F. Kennedy. The Survey Research Center of the University of Michigan, whose conclusions and data are highly respected by political scientists, reported that Kennedy lost more votes than he gained because of his religion. The center study showed that Kennedy's overall loss from Protestant Democrats was at least 4.5 million votes, considerably more than the number of Catholic Republicans and independents who chose Kennedy. Since the majority of Catholics who switched from Eisenhower to Kennedy probably would have voted for a Democratic candidate anyway, it seems likely that Kennedy's religion hurt his candidacy. So that is very interesting. From a book called A Woman Named Jackie by C. David Heyman, we read, "The accusation of John F. Kennedy was too young to get Catholic. He is such a poor Catholic," Jackie, his own wife, told columnist Arthur Kroc. "Too rich and too sickly," continued to be heard long after his nomination. When Lyndon Johnson grumbled that, quote, "he wouldn't be pushed around by a 43-year-old boy," unquote, he meant JFK. Eisenhower referred to him as, quote, unquote, "that young fellow," etc. So you see that he was accused even by his family of being not too Catholic enough. He's such a poor Catholic. I found that very interesting, though, that he was getting opposition even within his own family. Because you have to remember that the Kennedys are devout Roman Catholics, because in that very same book on page 178 we read, In the late summer of 1955, in connection with Kennedy's service on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Jack and Jackie departed on a 2-month tour of Europe. The trip, which included 10 days in Poland and an audience with the Pope, was to be a working vacation. In Rome, they were entertained by Claire Booth Luce, the American ambassador to Italy, at a dinner party attended by French Premier Georges Bidault. Afterwards, Kennedy and Bidault were eager to talk, but there was a language barrier. Jackie was called upon to act as interpreter. Later, Bidault wrote to her, "Never," he said, "have I encountered so much wisdom invested with so much charm," unquote. You see, these were not only devout Roman Catholics, but they sought the presence of the Pope, even in 1955. So 5 years before, or almost 6 years before, the John F. Kennedy was being elected president. On page 350, we read, one of these ideas was a trip to India and Pakistan with a stop to Rome to meet the Pope. She thought he wanted to accompany him. What he meant was, would she be willing to go by herself? Jackie agreed to make the Goodwill expedition provided she be allowed to take along with her sister Lee. She also asked her friend Joan Braden, who had been helping her raise funds for the National Cultural Center, to make the trip. Yeah. When I accompanied Jackie to India, I was invited along a friend, and then I did a piece of the Saturday Evening Post, said Braden. But it was going to be an official visit, and then they downgraded it to semi-official, which meant that all members of the press would have to pay their own way. But my husband Tom had just bought a newspaper, and we didn't have any money. So Jackie deputized me. I fielded many of the questions she was asking in India and Pakistan and answered them for her. In return, I went greatest free of charge. The journey started in March 8, 1962, when 100 reporters and 3-man film crew from the United States Information Agency, which was dispatched to film Jackie's expedition, joined the First Lady aboard her plane in New York. After 2 days of receptions and ceremonial teas in and around Rome, Jacqueline visited the Vatican for a private audience with Pope John XXIII. Big John, his nickname being, which she subsequently described as simple and natural. They spoke in French, and she presented the pontiff with a book of her husband's speeches. Yeah, I have never come across such a family up to my research, which was more devout Catholic than it was than the Kennedys. Kennedy also, or Jackie also made a poem about her husband. And that poem is called "He Would Find Love, He Would Never Find Peace, for He Must Go Seeking the Golden Fleece," coming from that book, A Woman Named Jackie, on page 134. Very strange. Yeah, that is here. You see that he would never find peace. He would never find peace, for he must go seeking the Golden Fleece. So she was referring to an author called Stephen Vincent Benet, who has also wrote a book called The Devil and Daniel Webster, by the Waters of Babylon. He received the Pulitzer Prize for poetry, and so it what was a choice of Jackie, and she was quoting that in regards of her own husband. He has to seek the Golden Fleece. What's the meaning of it? Referring to maybe the Argonauts and the quest for the Golden Fleece. That's a film who had come up also in that particular year, 1963, about the classical world of Greece and Rome. That's a very movie here, Jason and the Argonauts. And it was very interesting. This is just Ephesians here, 6. And I came to my knowledge, and I said, well, there was a quote in Ephesians 6, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. And you see that he is also not wrestling against flesh and blood, it seems. No, there is no flesh and there is no blood in them. Yeah, so this could also depict a spiritual war. Yeah. And that's a golden fleece, and the golden fleece, we mentioned that the golden fleece can do wonders. Yeah, so if you have the golden fleece, you can do wonders. And there is a quote that to go to have the throne, yeah, to be the king, you must to seek the golden fleece. That is in that very movie here, Jason and the Argonauts, from 1963. That's very interesting that the film was being pictured in 1963. I think it was very interesting. From the next book, is called A Question of Character, Life of John F. Kennedy by Thomas C. Reeves. We have the quotation of Washington Post. It would also be the best biography I read this year. And they were downplaying John F. Kennedy. He had only an IQ of intelligence quotient of 190, could barely spell, and etc., etc., etc. But in the same book, it is interesting because they were once again referring to the Fitzgeralds. Rose Fitzgerald being the maiden name of Rose Kennedy. The Fitzgeralds were a mighty Italian clan that had helped William the Conqueror become ruler of England. Honey Fitz was her father and had a reputation for graft and vote fraud, as well as a not-so-secret notorious affair with a girl named Toodles. Rose got her education in the Catholic Sacred Heart Convent, which she completed a month before her 20th birthday. Her father was removed from the House of Representatives after voting fraud was uncovered. Can we remind of the voting of the election of 1960, when also the mafia helped John F. Kennedy for the election? Maybe there's also strong influence from his mother's side when it's been depicted here that she was such a devout Roman Catholic. Yeah, that's very interesting find. I don't know, I have not followed the track of her father was being removed by the House of Representatives, but you can do your own research on that regard. JFK, from that book, told his mother off at age 5, "Gee, you're a great mother to go away and leave your children alone." As an adult, JFK confided to a friend, quote, "My mother was either at some Paris fashion house or else on her knees in some church. She was never there when we really needed her. My mother never really held me and hugged me. Never, never." Further, his father's lack of respect for his mother led JFK to say, that is a quote, "My mother is a nothing." And I think that you would not have expected that in that reading here.
No. Huh. Nope. That's right.
Joe's being the father, cruel treatment of Rose being his mother surely had an impact on all of the children. The fact that he would position their girlfriends and bring mistresses into the home. One stayed for several months and was integrated into the family's activities, conveyed powerful messages to the youngsters about his lack of concern and respect for others. Rose growing withdrawal into a world of her own and her frequent absences compounded the problem. Jack, perhaps more than the others, resented his mother's indifferences. He was later to tell a friend, quote unquote, "My mother is a nothing." Jack concealed this animosity from the public, of course. In his first authorized biography by James McGregor Burns, he described Rose as, quote unquote, "a very model mother for a big family." Theodore Sorensen would declare solemnly, Rose Kennedy was more quiet, devout, and less outwardly combative than her husband and sons. From her, the latter inherited much of their shy but appealing warmth and spiritual depth. Yeah, but my mother is a nothing. That's you see that she was a devout Roman Catholic, but she apparently had no any real feelings for her children. Maybe that also will explain the behavior of sexual promiscuity of John F. Kennedy. I think that he was just seeing his father as a role model. He was being pushed to the presidency. He did not like in the beginning. He did not want to become president. And yeah, he realized that important and influential and businessmen like his fathers, they used to have some mistresses. Yeah. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, it seems. I'm not blaming anybody, but you see that would also explain that maybe John F. Kennedy searched real love in life, and also came to the conclusion after I have read that, and after that had sacked in, I came to the conclusion that maybe that was also the naive behavior of the President Kennedy, to be among the people, to have no distance to the public, because he wanted to be loved. If you don't get love at your parents' home, then you need some kind, in a positive way, you need some kind of a compensation to be publicly loved in any other way. So shaking hands for him gave him the feeling that he was admired and loved and accepted. I know that's just simple psychology here on that regard, but can't you imagine that this is valid for the majority of politicians, that they are coming from a hostile environment or a very unemotional environment, and then they replace the public and their profession to gain some kind of sympathy, to have some kind of friends there, to have just their replacement family or just their replacement home. It's just a compensation for the lack of emotion and warmth and everything else and feelings you did not had in your youth or in your life when you were just a child and you had to obey. And maybe this is also the rejection or the reason for his rejection of the Roman Catholic belief, because both of his parents were devout Roman Catholic, and he looked for maybe a compromise in that. She says, okay, yes, I believe in God, but I just don't accept the Pope, I don't accept the Roman Catholic Church, therefore I go with the, not with the Roman Catholicism, but with the American Catholicism, which is far more liberal. And that, I think, has been depicted in all of his speeches and his public appearances. So much so, he made his mother proud of him when he was becoming president. Yeah, she said that being the mother of a president, that would be the best experience she ever had. That's what she said. Yeah, you don't mistake me, or this is just my opinion here. I've not read 25 books on JFK. I have never had the opportunity to meet him in person, of course. So I cannot tell anything, but the impression that I got is that he had to compensate the lack of emotion. And when being president and all these beautiful women approaching you, that you say that, oh yeah, now it's great, now I'm being loved, and I would cherry pick the one maybe which could suit my demands, and this is what successful people always do. Yeah, they just have a wife around for their children, and then they have some other women around. You see that he was used to that kind of behavior from his father's side, but this was a kind of behavior which many people and role models had in the 1960s. Remember, 5 years after JFK has been assassinated, there was a kind of a free love and summer of love and all the things, and so many people were fooling around with girlfriends or with substitutes and mistresses and all the stuff. You know, very prominent example would be Bruce Lee, because he was married to an American woman. He had 2 children, 1 boy and a girl, and he was fooling around because it was the end of the 60s. Imagine growing up without a mother to hug and kiss you. JFK's father, quote, tolerated little nonsense and no disobedience, unquote. The life of JFK lived at home was not a life of compassion, but one of rigid obedience. The children were stripped of many things ordinary children would have. They didn't even have their own rooms. Most children have a room of their own sometimes in which to place their belongings and knickknacks. The few times JFK as a boy invited friends over, they were frightened to death at how his father would fly into a rage and give the Kennedy's boys a tongue lashing. The children were not allowed to express pain. For instance, when one of the Kennedys were hurt and came to his mother for sympathy, she ordered, "On your feet, now you know how to behave. Go out there and behave as you know you should." It is highly likely that strictness was related to some type of mind control, which even then was practiced by satanic families. So once again, this is opinion. Joe had his daughter given a prefrontal lobotomy and then banished to a nursing convent. From then on, his daughter Rosemary did not exist. One wonders what the full story was about Rosemary. Was she sexually abused, as is done to so many of the elite daughters of satanic families? Felix Frankfurter, who played such a prominent role with Charles T. Russell, was a good friend of Joe's. So you see, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but what I want to say is you just have to bear the fact that these Kennedys had a charisma, and they had not that youth that you would have expected from a rich and wealthy family. These devout Catholics, they are in for strict education, and there is not much of a feeling when after the message that her own son has been killed, the mother is sorting out things and praying the rosary. Yeah, usually a mother, I would think, would bear out with tears and crying all over the world. Yeah, but what do I know, huh? What do I know? What do I know? In that book of Burton Hirsch, The Old Boys, the American Elite and the Origins of the CIA, it has been stated, quote, JFK went for 1 year to the London School of Economics, according to the story given the public. Actually, he went there for 1 month, didn't do any academic work and came back home. But it's significant that his father tried to send him to a school in which so many of the elite have gone to. JFK had helped in writing and putting out a book entitled Why England Slept. Henry Lucci, who had a Time magazine and who was a good friend of Joe Kennedy, gave the book good publicity in Time magazine. And his father bought between 30,000 to 40,000 of the book and stored them into the attic and basement of his Hyannisport home in order to make Jack's book a bestseller. If that is correct, what that book is pointing out, then you know how success has been made and is been made today. Yeah, you see, there are many things very interesting in John F. Kennedy, but he was just a politician. Yeah, he was a role model for many people, but I think that if you would like to look behind John F. Kennedy, I don't think that anybody would like to have to exchange with him, only not if he would not been assassinated. Yeah, and for the public appearance, it seems that he was a very modest type. If you compare them to some kind of eccentric criminal extent of Lyndon B. Johnson, that was a very interesting picture here. But there is also the thing that there are behind every politician, there are many influential people behind. There's a very interesting find here. It's called from extranewsfeed.com, Killing Kennedy's Dark Politics. An unnamed, it's been said, I don't highly doubt it, an unnamed White House photographer claimed to have taken this photo of his younger brother, Robert Francis Kennedy, and LBJ's first encounter after Johnson returned to D.C. from Dallas, where LBJ just gleefully watched unseen killers shoot Bobby's brother in the face with what resembled an explosive bullet. When Bobby Kennedy first sees Lyndon Johnson after JFK's assassination, he attacks him and shouting, "Why do you have my brother killed?" And these two will be enemies. And you know that from the last session, when the father Willibald Schneider was being stated, this is not for the public, this is not for the official record, and he claimed that LBJ says before the assassination of Robert Kennedy, Bobby gave us much trouble in the party, quote unquote. Yeah, so these two were enemies. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, I did not know that. Yeah, a few weeks before Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson told Father Schneider, "Bobby gives us a lot of trouble in the party." And him personally, of course, as well, because he was one of the close suspects of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. When Robert Kennedy was being informed by the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, when he was been told on the telephone, "I have news for you, the president has been shot," a disbelieving RFK later incredulously recalls, "I think he told me with pleasure." Yeah, because JFK had a lot of enemies. Yeah, and that's the result of running for presidency for the brother of JFK. So also his also another child of Rose Kennedy has been assassinated. And that might be the case or the cause for that. With RFK's death, the cover-up is complete. Jack's kid brother can no longer become president, use all the machinery of state to figure everything out and wrench the country back free from the forever war's fascist clutches. In a poignant utterance 3 days before his death, Robert Kennedy tells trusted friends that he will reopen the investigation into his revered older brother's brutal public slaying. So the secret team killed him for it. This is an assumption, but you see that this is highly likely. I don't find any notable source for that, but of course, when he was running for president and he would have more power to investigate the death of his older brother. So they had to avoid RFK becoming president of the United States. This is an interesting picture of leisure time for John F. Kennedy, sitting here in the swimming pool. Kennedy sits on a diving board with racist Southern anti-civil rights Florida Senator George Mathers. I don't care about this is opinion here, but he sits on the diving board with George Mathers. Mafia Don Johnny Rosselli launched behind them poolside in shades. He later becomes suspect number 1 in the mob version of the assassination. Nothing to see here. Please move on. You see, the line of suspects is extremely long in the case of John F. Kennedy. But the thing is that these connections that also helped him becoming president. You don't become president of the United States if you are a nurse. You don't become president of the United States if you are a clerk. You don't become president of the United States if you're a bus driver. You only become president of the United States if you got much, much, much financial backing. So you either have to be very rich or you have to have the right connections in high places. JFK Red Prague friends might include token colored man Sammy Davis Jr. and many, many, many people behind the scenes. So it has also been stated he had to be using LSD, but I have to ask who did not use LSD in the beginning and mid of the 1960s. Please ask Paul McCartney. Many people. Many people. So one of his mistresses, Mary Pinchot, had an acid dealer called Timothy Leary. And the problem is that you are running into the next problem. I don't want to go into all his love affairs, but Mary Pinchot was being married with a CIA agent called Mayer. So he did not confront the CIA only on professional matters, but also in private concerns or private matters here. Yeah, so that is where do you want to start? Where do you want to start? We cannot do 150 sessions on Kennedy alone. But just to see that everything is connected here. If you like to become a household name in politics, you have to sacrifice yourself. Because you need the majority of voters. And as we know, Brad, that the majority of people are on the broad way leading to destruction. You see, they have to commit being yourself favorable and enjoyable for the masses, for the anti-Christian people. So you have to sacrifice one side, or you have to make commitments. The Antichrist people would never elect Christ as their savior. So Antichrist people would never elect a Christian president, being the office of president totally unchristian in the first place, of course. But where to start? Where to start? And so one of the commitments is that you have to ensure that the economy is running, that people are not unemployed, and all the people in the United States behind the industrial companies, they wanted to have war in Vietnam because that would suit them for their financial needs. Yeah, and so JFK has signed the NSAM, National Security Action Memorandum, including plans to withdraw 1,000 US military personnel by the end of 1963. As soon as this becomes real for Brown and Root, Bell Helicopter, Boeing, Dow Chemical, and DuPont and Koch Industries, all of the other Kennedy's haters find a home and corporate sponsors. Planners hatch the assassination plot in these boardrooms, and JFK's death will preserve their bottom line. Yeah, that's the financial side, or if you would like to say so, this is just their benefit being complemented in the assassination. The Vietnam War was a cash cow. Halliburton predecessor Brown and Root makes at least $300 million, Bell $600 million. Boeing builds 744 pieces of B-52 bombers at a cost of $127 million each. Stratofortresses are heavily used to level Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Millions more are made of maintenance and modernization over the plan's 10 years of production and deployment to that very year. Barrels of leftover Agent Orange. So the government is not against using chemicals in warfare against public. This is not only chemicals against soldiers. These chemicals then were been sprayed from planes into the jungle, which means you cannot guarantee that there are only soldiers there. You have to count in for the fact that there might be also civilians and animals, etc., etc. So when it comes down to the thing that they are using chemical warfare, you think of the recent times, please. Yeah. Dow manufactures chemical weapons like the Agent Orange and napalm used to defoliate 12% of Vietnam, 1.4 billion hectares of dense jungle. How much of these chemicals Dow actually produced is still a topic of debate, but pictures show leftovers substantial enough to fill desert islands, if that picture is correct, of course. And this is the Memorandum 273 of Lyndon B. Johnson being in charge, being in office for just 3 days, and then setting everything back to standard to go to war in Vietnam, of course. So everything that JFK and his government wanted to avoid then would be left in the paper basket, and then would be set in place with the new Memorandum 273, so that then the Vietnam War could emerge. NSAM 273 was drafted 1 day before the assassination and signed 4 days after. It reverses NSAM 263's directive to incrementally withdraw US forces from Vietnam. The interesting part, I think, is that one. Huh? 1 day before the assassination. There were prophets in the presidential Johnson's government, it seems. And on that bombshell, I like to hand it over to my beloved brother Brad to close that down. You see that we do not have to feel sorry for anything. What shall happen will happen. But you see that the President Kennedy was much more a president for the people and much more moderate than his successor Lyndon B. Johnson. And to learn all the facts around it from the side from his mother's side, from Rose Kennedy, being a countess of the Roman Catholic Church, you see that I think that Mrs. Kennedy had a hard time seeing her own son as not as a devout Roman Catholic as she wished to. So thank you very much. And until the next session, please read your Bible. I'm handing it over to my really beloved brother, Brett.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, that just proves a point also that, some of our worst enemies are of our own household. And that the Kennedy family was no exception, was it? That Kennedy defied what should we say, the preferences of of those parents who were devout Catholics and raised their son to be devout Catholic. But he obviously was not expecting to have the presidency because his older brother was being groomed for that. But he, of course, was a victim of the what was it, of the service he was in. He was killed, I believe, Michael, was it, or was he
yeah, he was killed in a Secret Service mission on a plane when a bomb exploded on the plane.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, so the Kennedys are no exception to having unexpected things happen. So yeah, I think it's fascinating story, and certainly one that is not that easy to come to terms with, being that we have I shouldn't say dictatorship, but rather a so-called democracy that prides itself in freedom. And what freedom do they give? What kind of freedom is it that we're allowed to have? That's something we all ought to question a little bit more, because certainly it's not really in line with what the Bible says, that we should stand in the liberty where Christ has made us free. It's a different kind of a world that we live in here. This is not the kingdom of Christ. This is rather the kingdom of Antichrist and all of his minions, because we have quite a bit of power at stake, and that's kind of where the Kennedy family was going. They wanted that power. They wanted to please the powers that be, of course, at that time. But then again, I guess, the family had to face its own enemy, which is, the other side of Roman Catholicism, the liberal side as opposed to the conservative side, the ultramontane, Michael. So that is very interesting. Looking forward to continuing in the research you've done on this. Many sessions you've done with Jörg Lissmann in German in this series on the Kennedys, and also conspiracies as in general. And certainly I feel that we're going to be going into territory that may not have been tread on before, Michael, and that's great. I really appreciate the research you've done, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone next time. Maranatha.